Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this evening's meeting of the Cabinet. The first thing to do is to advise you of the fire evacuation procedures for this evening's meeting. There are no fire alarms scheduled. Therefore, if the alarm sounds, get out. The fire exits are located at the rear and sides of this room. Get down the stairs and we all meet up again in War Memorial Park. Secondly, just to remind everybody that the proceedings are being webcast, and therefore please observe propriety in the language that one might choose to use. Declarations of interest. Are there any declarations of interest to be made this evening on this evening's agenda? Councillor Donnell.
Item 3, just to remind Cabinet that my wife is a civil servant at Paper D. This is at DWP. I'm not aware of her having any impact around this site, but I'm advised that I have to remind you of this, that she may have had at every stage.
Thank you very much. I am glossed over to receive apologies for absence. We have one apology this evening from Councillor Finney for the benefit of the minutes. Member and public participation I'm going to take within the agenda items, which I hope we'll get to very quickly. But I think we have... Well, I can't actually see him. Oh, you are there. Good. We have one member speaking later on. Referrals and full council, there are urgent items, there are none. The minutes of the previous meetings, which were held on the 21st of May and the 6th of June, are we happy to accept those as written? Yeah? Good. Then, say, urgent items, there are none. Referrals from full council, there are none. Nor are there any references or reports from other committees, nor any petitions. So we move straight to item 11 on the agenda. And I think what we will do, since Councillor Bierman is here, if we may, we'll take and he wishes to speak on the capital outturn report. Councillor Isaac, if we can take that one first, and then, which is paper C, and then we'll go back to the Treasury Management Annual Report, which is paper B, thereafter, just for the sake of not keeping him any longer than he needs to be detained. So, if you would like to introduce item 2 there, and Councillor Bierman, if you'd like to come forward at this stage, then we can get things underway.
Thank you, Chair. This paper is the report on the 2012-13 revenue and capital outturn. So it's comparing the actual outturn with the budget. The actual outturn shows a surplus of £667,300, which demonstrates that there's been effective planning and control of our finances, expenditure and income, despite difficult economic conditions. The key points are, in terms of savings that have been achieved, of £528,000 on employees. That's efficiency savings reviews. This it's worth noting that there's an ongoing savings of £2.3 million and a net reduction of nearly 50 full-time employees over the period of this initiative. We've made savings on transport of £153,000 because of lower vehicle running costs, and savings on contracted services of £342,000 around household waste and the tendered bus services. We've had to make a provision that had been made previously for the winding up of municipal mutual insurance of £380,000, which was funded as planned from the reserves, and also there's been reduced interest income of £382,000. On the capital outturn, this was £4.65 million against the latest budget of £5.21 million. So we achieved an 89% spend. A number of major capital schemes were completed during the year, including St Andrew's Medical Centre and the Overton Recreation Centre. There's been delayed expenditure on the council's ICT and also on the council's offices. We've also had to make a provision in relation to the MALS refurbishment. It's been very disappointing about the lack of progress that's been achieved despite our best efforts with the contractors, and it's fast reaching a point where we have to draw a line on things. We've got a revised capital programme for 2013/14 to 2016/17 of £32 million over that 5-year period. So I would conclude by recommending this report to Cabinet.
Thank you, Councillor Isaac. Councillor Bierman, I'm assuming that nothing that you wish to say actually is likely to involve the disclosure of exempt information.
No, I've listened carefully to what Mr. Isaac said about the, Councillor Isaac, forgive me, said about the MALS, and I will allude to it, but not anything in detail that will cause a problem, I don't think.
Sorry, in which case, normally you have 2 minutes. I shan't be too strict.
I'm relieved to hear that, not that I intend to prattle on for long.
Please, but please don't be too verbose.
Yeah. If I may point you to page 73 of 185, that's Appendix 4, and right at the very top you'll see Green Transport Initiative. And if you read the text there, you will see that during my mayoralty there was a saving of in the order of £43,000, which is something that I trust the Cabinet would wish to celebrate, as I'm sure the council taxpayers will do, because that's in these times of closing things down, that's a saving that brought no disadvantage. Indeed, I would argue a saving that brought advantages. The only notional disadvantage was probably to my wife, because a large part of that saving was brought about by virtue of my wife and I cycling to a lot of mayoral engagements, and obviously we had to put in a bit of effort for that. So as I say, that I think has been the only sacrifice, and I'm therefore pleased that we made such a saving, and was hoping that a modest part of it, i.e. not the full amount, £25,000 there, could be put to specifically green transport initiatives. Now it's entitled Green Transport Initiative singular. I think that should be plural in terms of how it could possibly be applied, but I'm concerned when I read the recommendation here that it should disappear into the Green Investment Reserve. Now, okay, it might be an add-on to it, so that the Green Investment Reserve was £1 million plus the 25,000, but it then becomes part of something that is no longer quite as special. And I would like to ring-fence the £25,000, which I did discuss with the Chief Executive as a possibility before I left office, and there didn't seem to be any administrative barriers to so doing, so that one could not only have saved this money, but also show a real return for having done so. Councillor Donnell has kindly suggested that there might be an issue about whether it was revenue or capital. My thinking was more capital, but I would hope that it would be flexible, subject to the circumstances of what might come forward. So basically, I am asking that it be ring-fenced for specifically green transport initiatives and not part of this Green Investment Reserve, which I would say in passing, I've asked a couple of times what's happening with that, where's it going and what's it about, and I haven't got an answer to it, and it might go along the lines of things that I don't share enthusiasm for, because I don't share enthusiasm for all green initiatives or so-called green initiatives like bottled collection or glass collection in as much as it isn't particularly green. It might be a good service, but it's not green. So with that, I ask for you to reconsider the 25,000 and ring fencing it. And I will just throw in the question of the MALS and the fact that it is now allegedly complete. I sat on the MALS map. There was much discussion with Councillor Isaac's predecessor about cycle parking provision and enhancement thereof. It's still to materialise, and as I said at the time, the only changes to the cycling provision is to downgrade it in as much as the one cycle provision that did exist to the entrance to the MALS has been moved further away from the entrance. So I hope that when the sums are sorted out about what might be done in the MALS, that it is incomplete in that respect will be borne in mind as well. Thank you, Leader.
Thank you very much. Councillor Isaac.
Right, if I could take the point about the MALS first of all, Councillor Beerman. Cycling provision is very important to the administration. This is the first I've heard of this particular issue, and what I'll do is I'll go and have a look at that and see whether we're not meeting what we agreed to do, and come back to you. On the point about the green transport, given that Councillor Donnell and I have discussed this briefly, and that you've obviously discussed it prior to this meeting with him, and it's his portfolio, I'm going to ask Councillor Donnell to respond to you on that.
I think a discussion would be the wrong description. Councillor Donnell did say the way he was thinking, but we didn't really have more than half a minute, and it wasn't a proper exchange, I think one would have to say.
Well, I think we'll then let him respond to you properly now.
Thank you, Leader. First of all, I think we should all compliment Councillor Beerman on his conversion to good conservative principles of saving taxpayers' money, whenever it is. I'm very like how Mrs. T, I think, viewed the national economy when she was managing it, on making sure that every penny was spent wisely. So, first of all, my congratulations around that. Just wanted to clarify, because I think the paper is maybe not as clear as it should be. It was never the Cabinet's intention that this 25,000 become part of the 1 million. It was always going to be 1 million and 25,000. So in no way were we trying to not recognise your savings, Councillor Beerman. Yeah. Now, having thought longer with this with Councillor Isaac, I think there is an issue around the Green Investment Fund is definitely one that we are investing in green projects in order to have the community good of better environment, but also a financial good of a healthy rate of return for the council taxpayers. Your £25,000, or rather the taxpayers' £25,000, I think for this would be more suitable that if we had the flexibility to use it both as a capital spend or a revenue spend, which would allow us to use it for some seed funding as well as funding any initiatives, etc. Now, obviously, we have governance issues around that we have to spend this in accordance with the council plan, in accordance with our spending criteria that we have laid out and have been passed through the council. So what Councillor Isaac and myself are proposing is that we put this onto the Green Investment Fund, but we make sure that it can also be used both for investment and for revenue. Obviously, we would be spending this as per the priorities as laid out in the climate change strategy when it comes through, which will then go through Ofcom on the climate change panel. It's appropriate we spend taxpayers' money in accordance with the policies as cleared through this council chamber all the way through. However, as part of that, I do think it's appropriate that that we have a large amount of consultation with yourselves, and you have some input into around what the proposals of that are. I think that's the best way forward. It hopefully will meet your requirement for having that money available for green transport initiatives, but also meet the governance requirements of taking this through.
A supplementary question.
Please, Leader. I do have to correct one thing, though. I mean, Councillor Donnell stated as if it were fact that I've been converted to saving taxpayers' money, which, of course, is balderdash. I don't need to be converted. I have always been in favour of that.
I think it would be ever so helpful for everybody here if we could just skip all the political.
But I'm sorry, Leader, I'm sorry, that was introduced by Councillor Donnell.
I know, but I'm asking, please, can we just skip it all and get on with the business in hand? Be great.
Well, I think cabinet members should lead by example, and I feel I have to defend myself in
Well, I
that
don't
respect.
think you do.
Okay, I'll say no.
We take that as read.
Uh,
And I think
and
any
would-
noises off are not necessary either. Let us just get on
Thank
with
you.
the business of the evening.
Secondly, thank you for clarifying that, Councillor Donnell. It's moving in the right direction. I'm a little nervous. I mean, I do frankly feel robbed, and I don't feel that I'm necessarily going to have the same sort of opportunity to help direct where the 25,000 goes. You say there's a question of governance. If I can make a parallel with what happens with 106 money, where ward members are engaged with how 106 money is spent, and indeed often consulted for ideas on the expenditure. If it were that sort of arrangement, then I would feel somewhat happier. But I'd like to feel reassured that it wasn't just, oh well, if somebody remembers, Councillor Bierman might be told. And indeed also, I'd like to have the reassurance that if a good idea is put to me by a member of the public, which I've invited them to do, that will be taken with some sort of preference in terms of what I'm putting forward as opposed to what the Cabinet might wish. Thank you.
Councillor Donnell.
I absolutely would fully engage with you. I think the Section 106 analogy is a good one, where local members are consulted and asked to put forward ideas. However, the actual spend of those is subject to the normal governance regulations of the council. So I would absolutely give an open commitment of engaging with you around the spend of this money. I think one of the things that we're trying to do on the environmental portfolio is to engage the members of the public and the green groups, and we've had several sessions with them for their ideas. So certainly I would welcome any ideas from any member of the public or any green group, for want of a better name, or yourself on how to spend this one, and will commit to fully engaging with you around this spend.
Thank you, Leader. I look forward to seeing how it works. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. In that case, we should take these as individual items. So are we happy with the capital and revenue outturn as reported? Good. So can we go back then to item 1, 11.1, the Treasury Management Annual Report. Councillor Isaac.
Thank you, Leader. This report is about the outcome for 2012-13 of the money that we manage in the money markets. Because of lower interest rates, there's been a reduction in the amount of interest that we've earned against what we were budgeting of £382,000. So we had budgeted for 3.52 million, and the net interest was 3.138 million. It is because long-term interest rates fell during the period. Investments in long-term gilts were not made, but short-term deposits were instead. In terms of our overall position, the actual overall return on our money was 2.14% during the period, and benchmarked against other local authorities, which took place, benchmarking took place in March 2013, showed the council with a return in the best fit category, i.e. low risk and high return compared to other local authorities. It's also worth noting that the market value of the council's bond holdings as at 31st of March 2013 showed a £6.3 million capital gain. Because these are such challenging times to invest in the money markets, we are being proactive, and we are planning to appoint KPMG to advise us, because it's important that given the amount of money that we have to invest on behalf of residents, that we have access to top quality expert financial advice. I recommend the report to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Other members, Councillor Jyward.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to comment to say I'm pleased that Councillor Isaac is bringing on board some advisors to continue to ensure that we're generating healthy returns from our invested cash on behalf of taxpayers. As Councillor Isaac referred to page 34, our return is better than many other local authorities, but we must never be complacent, and it's right that we're continuing to get the best deal for our residents from their money. The follow-on from that, of course, is that we must also consider other ways to use our investment holdings, not just to retain them as cash investments, but to continue to look for other opportunities, property and otherwise, within the borough or outside, to ensure that we're delivering best value for taxpayers, while also bringing forward facilities that benefit perhaps residents of this borough, or indeed benefits residents of a much wider area as appropriate.
Thank you. Anybody else? If not, I think the only point I would add is, whilst that we are generating, I think, better returns than most other boroughs would be, nobody can be really happy with the returns that are being generated from the money markets at the moment. It's going to be a tough time going forward in terms of the way that we deal with our income streams from whichever source that they may come. We can anticipate that we'll be seeing another reduction this week in the amount that we're getting through the government grant, and there seems little prospect that interest rates are likely to rise significantly in the foreseeable future. So we have to work very hard to achieve even part of what we used to achieve in our investment, and nobody should think that that's an easy job in this current market. We're happy to accept the report as such. Good, thank you. Then, turning away from money, we move on to item 3 here, Housing and Homeless Strategy 2013 to 2018. Councillor Golding.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet, this is a proposed strategy for the years 2013-18, which has to be approved by Council. It's been subject to 2 lots of external consultation, 2 very helpful meetings of the Housing and Environment Ofcom. It builds on the very successful strategy we had for the years preceding years from 2008 to 2012, but it updates the actions that we have to take in the light of the current circumstances facing our residents. So I recommend to Cabinet that we recommend it to Council for adoption.
Does anybody wish to? If not, I think it's a very comprehensive document, actually. It covers a lot of ground. And I, having watched the webcasts of the Ofcoms when it was discussed, I thought there was indeed a very lot of constructive and useful discussion. It's exactly a perfect example of how helpful Ofcoms can be if they put their mind to it, rather than indulging in political toing and froing. I'm quite happy that we endorse this for Council to approve. We all agreed? Good. In which case then, let's go on to item 12, the future of the Centre shuttle bus service. Councillor Mrs. Osselton.
Thank you, Leader. The Centre's shuttle bus service has been a contracted service since 2002. Its contract was revised in 2007, and it's now up again in 2013. It provides alternative journey choices benefiting a wide range of customer base, for example the station to Basingview or back to the leisure centre. Each contract has been won by a specific bus service each year, but it is now up for retendering via the Journal of the European Union because of the costing. We've had numerous workshops, and it has been to Ofcom. We've taken into factor all that was said under section 8 at the actual Ofcom, and that we're recommending that it's proposed, I should say, that the shuttle bus is retendered. We look at the introduction of smart ticketing. The operator is to promote more patronage and support, and we look at the climate change. We've agreed that biofuel is not a mandatory requirement of the contract, but environmental considerations are, and this will be part of the tender evaluation, so that the benefit of other fuel options may be explored. It was asked why we had not used electric buses. This was a very costly option. However, by not including a mandatory biofuel requirement as per the decision notice, will allow tenders to propose differing environmental friendly fuel variants, of which electric buses could be one. We've looked at 1 year carbon reduction for the whole of the operation and other restrictions in the decision notice. Something that we've not done before, but it is in our constitution that we can, is allowed that 4 spaces for members from the Economic Prosperity and Performance Overview Committee will be available to actually be part of the tendering. They won't actually make the decision, but they will be useful if they come on board and discuss the actual tendering process. And to this I recommend this report to you.
It's a novel concept, members being useful. Any other comments people wish to make? Councillor Donnell was first.
Thank you, Leader. I'd just like to say I'm very pleased that we have kept in the environmental capacity side for the shuttle bus. I think we're making absolutely the right decision to let the market decide, with the expert providers decide what technology they can do, rather than us making that decision. But I'm pleased that we have a carbon reduction target in there.
So, John Warden.
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to make the point that I think it's really important at this time that we're investing in Basingview and at the leisure park, that we're continuing to make it accessible to residents of the borough to come in by train, or indeed residents from outside this borough to come in by train to access those 2 key sites within Basingstoke very easily. And I'm pleased to see that part of the incentives under this contract will be for the operator to increase the use of this bus, thereby reducing the cost to taxpayers, which of course is a good thing as well.
Thank you. It is a lot of money. I think it's nevertheless a lot of money that supports a very much appreciated service. And on that basis, we accept the recommendation or the decision. Then item 13, the Community Support Fund. Councillor Golding again.
Thank you, Leader. Cabinet will recall that Council has already approved a fund of £500,000 to be known as the Community Support Fund, to help our residents through these particularly challenging times for many of them, particularly in relation to homelessness and housing benefit. If you look at the decision notice, it says the reasons of the decision are that the initiatives being proposed will enhance the range and level of assistance the Council will provide to help manage current homelessness pressures, as well as supporting vulnerable households' transition into the new welfare framework. The whole of what I'm bringing forward tonight is about helping our residents who need assistance to get from their current situation to the situation that is sustainable in the long term under the new welfare reforms and the changes in availability of housing. So it's very much about helping people to get from A to B and make a success of their lives from then on. We are proposing, and it's quite technical, so I want to make quite sure we've understood this, we're proposing the environment of 235,000 to the housing and regeneration portfolio in the present year. And if you look at the first column of the decision notice, that's to spend 45,000 on 2 temporary specialist support staff who will be able to work in detail with households who need detailed help, who are not able to work their way through to a new stable situation by themselves. We will put an extra 45,000 into homeless prevention funding, essentially things like deposits or guarantees to help people access private sector funding. There will be a 5,000 agreed with the voluntary sector for additional work on rough sleeping, and although the government has increased the amount of discretionary housing payment, we're pretty confident that won't be enough, so we're proposing, and in this decision deciding, to put another 140,000 in for the present year. Because recruiting staff is for 2 years, we are also now deciding to carry forward 75,000, 65,000 to next year and 15,000 to the following year, which will enable us to be sure we have in place the funding for those staff for 2 years. But that leaves another 190,000, which we have penciled in to further funding for homeless prevention and topping up the discretionary housing payment. But we are not deciding that tonight because we want to see, firstly, when the welfare reform changes are introduced in this borough, the universal credit and things, we also want to see what value we're getting out of the spending we're already committing to. So we're viring 235,000, we're carrying forward 75,000, and we're leaving 190,000 subject to later decision. Eagle-eyed ones amongst you, particularly the financial ones, will have noticed there's an error in the figures in the table, and that the figure towards the bottom right that says 255 should say 250. So I'm hoping the minute taker's listening, and I'm proposing that we make that formal change to the decision notice. It should be 250. And subject to that, I commend this to Cabinet.
I commend your eagle-eyedness, if that's the right thing to commend. This was money which I was very keen that we allocated in the budget process last year. I think it is important that we do look after the more vulnerable people in our community, but not by feather bedding them, but by helping them through what hopefully is going to be a transitional period when a greater understanding and a greater knowledge and awareness of opportunity could be needed. It seemed a very sensible way of spending the money, particularly sensible to hold some of it back so that we can get a better appreciation of the effectiveness of what we've done to date, and then to look at what we are in possible new avenues that we can explore in the future. Anybody else? Any other comments? Councillor Donnell?
Thank you, Leader. I just wanted to pay thanks to the portfolio holder and the officer team for bringing this together. I feel very proud we put together this community support fund and pushed it through. I think it's one of the finest things we've done in this administration. It's a pity that it didn't attract cross-party support when it came forward to Council, but I think we should feel very proud of doing it. I would urge that we all vote for it and implement this as quickly as possible.
Anybody else? If not, we shall all vote for it. Good. Thank you. Right, we now come to the one that I've not been able to say all day, but I will try and say it, which is item 14, the Shop Start project. Managed it.
Thank you, Leader. In the Basingstoke Town Centre programme, we said that we will work as a landlord of some shop premises to understand what is needed to assist new businesses and activities to set up in the council's premises in the top of the town, and to support them on the way to attracting new footfall, being financially sustainable and successful, implementing new measures to help by the end of 2013. That's what this does. It's one step along the road to revitalising the top of the town. It's working with BCOT to give young people in our borough an opportunity to test out their entrepreneurial skills, an opportunity for retail products from local traders, and indeed some, I'm sure, from beyond, to test the market in Basingstoke and to provide people with a stepping stone to see whether they ought to be taking a unit themselves at the top of the town, making the top of the town a better place for everyone to shop. There are details that are still to be confirmed, hence the confidential paper attached to the report available to Cabinet this evening, but I do move that this proposal be adopted by the Council.
Yeah, I must say I really do hope this works. I think it's a great idea to kill, I hate to use the term kill two birds with one stone, but to achieve two parallel objectives. Part of our long-standing project to regenerate the top of town, but also to give a new outlet for the enthusiasm and the creativity of the young people within the borough to really go and achieve something that's real and makes a genuine contribution to the community as a whole by bringing in a new dynamic to retailing in the area. So I wish it a tremendous amount of success and hope that we can see it flourishing long into the future. Any other points? If not, I think we'll agree that it's a jolly good thing to do. Then the last thing that we have to do is to note how active Councillor Mrs. Ostleton has been, taking lots of decisions under delegated powers. We just have to note those, so we note those. And that concludes the business of this meeting for this evening. Thank you all very much.